All right, welcome to episode 15 of Living in Infinity. We're going to do a bit different of an episode today. Both me and Asher have kind of put together like a list of topics that we find super interesting, either like philosophical ideas or like business ideas. And we're just gonna kind of go back and forth and discuss these ideas that we have written down and just kind of see what ideas stem from it. So, Asher, do you want to start with your first one?
Yeah. The first one I came up with was it's just a simple question. How do you remain positive throughout the process of building? Building there being pretty vague, but I guess just in this context, like business would probably be the most applicable thing to think about here. But I know we're both young men trying to get our own thing going, and I'm assuming I think I know for a fact that you kind of had similar experiences to me in the sense that you start out with this hopeful, optimistic vision of what you want to do, what you want to create. And then in the process of building that thing, you just have these moments where you're weighed down by the inevitable hardship that you hit. So my question um, maybe what are some of those experiences that you've had, and what have you done to deal with them, to push through them in a way that you still come out the other side remaining positive, optimistic, whatever.
Right. I think, yeah, I've definitely been through this a couple of times. Because in the beginning, when you have that first idea, like the motivation is like seemingly unlimited because you kind of have that like delusional optimism in a way. Like you don't know what you're really getting into, so you're very like excited about it because you don't know like the shitstorm that you're about to have to go through, basically. And then once you actually start hitting those road bumps, that's when things start to like you lose that momentum, and then that's where you kind of have to figure out like where that motivation is going to come from. But kind of what I've started to do recently is like I kind of reframe it in a way like any road bump that you're going to hit is really just a learning experience. So it's not like you're getting caught up or like going through these failures. Really, the more you can fail and the faster you can fail, the quicker you're actually going to get to whatever goal or outcome you're trying to get to. Because really, starting any kind of venture, all it is just about staying alive. It's not about avoiding mistakes because they are inevitable regardless. And so you should anticipate these and actually be somewhat, I don't say excited when they happen, but like be happy that they're happening because the quicker you encounter them, the quicker you can figure out ways to get around them or keep moving on. And it kind of just snowballs from there. So like I said, it's not a matter of like trying to avoid mistakes. It's just being able to recover from them very quickly. Um, and then two, just like having that main mission in mind, whatever it is, your main overarching goal. Um,
How do you remind yourself of that? Like, do you ever feel like your vision of that mission fades?
it definitely can. Um, I've been trying to think of like a specific example. By fades, does it mean like, do you mean like you're just not like you're less interested in it,
Sure.
or you lose confidence that it could happen?
Or you lose motivation, or or sometimes, like, with my own, experience, I'll notice, like, just by understanding of that, uh, overarching mission, kind whatever fades a little bit.
Yeah. Um, it definitely happens. I think, at least for me, it's a bit cyclical in a way. Like when things get harder or you feel like you're not making any progress, it's really hard to maintain that motivation. But I think as long as you know for sure that what you're striving for is like what you really, really want to do, there are so many different ways that you can find motivation to like keep working at it. Like for me, it's most people end up stopping at this like area that you're talking about right now. Like most people get to these harder times and that's where they stop. And that's why 99% of businesses fail. That's why majority of entrepreneurs never really make it because they hit these road bumps and they just kind of like give up from there or let it fade out. So for me, I find that super motivating because if you can acknowledge that's just a phase you're in and also acknowledge that it's likely going to pass once you get that forward momentum going again, then you're going to be able, I mean, if you can at least acknowledge that, you're way ahead of everybody else because
Yeah.
most people won't even do that.
So that kind of ties in with another point I had made for today. It's the idea that running long distances perfectly represents that exactly what you're talking about. Um, as you start to run a lot of miles, you'll just inevitably encounter low points. But I think the trick to getting all those miles done is just accepting those low moments, just being like, yep, this is where we're at. We're going to go slow. It's going to hurt, whatever, knowing
Yeah.
that for some reason, whether it's uh, something you eat, get some electrolytes, or sometimes it just happens. The recovery just happens. But eventually, you just know that you're going to feel good again for whatever reason.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, so I think that's why I like running so much, is just because it's a great, like, daily reminder of like the good's going to come around again.
Yeah.
And I don't
Another big,
know. Well, just to finish it out, like I've done a fair amount of other activities like skiing. I skied a lot. And whatever else, golf. It's just I haven't really noticed that in any other thing that I've done. So that's a particularly cool thing about running.
yeah. Another really good thing too from keeping motivation is um, not being result or outcome dependent on what you're doing. So especially in business, you have to learn to fall in love with the process more than the results that you're getting. Because if you do rely on results for motivation, there's a time where that's going to dry up completely, especially in the beginning when you're just starting. Like there's very little like results you're going to get, whether it be customers or feedback, whatever it is. Like you're not really going to have much of that, if at all. And so, really, where you should find the motivation is the process of building itself and being able to like look at the progress that you're making, even though it may not be driving results from a revenue standpoint or whatever, but just looking at the progress that you're making and being like, okay, I actually am moving forward. Because if
Yeah,
you're
like
just relying on numbers, it's not going to work out long term.
it's like, okay, the thing itself doesn't have value per se, but it's the process of building it is increasing your value. Um,
Hmm.
I've noticed that with my Substack. So like I've written this Substack now for almost a year. Engagement's like super low. And that there's times where it just really is frustrating because
Yeah,
I think they're good articles and I'm excited about them and I want them to get out there. But obviously just, that, being new to it just doesn't happen, in the blink of an eye. And, um, so in those moments where I'm frustrated about it, I just focus on the fact that like, even if these articles don't end up really ever going anywhere, I'm still better off for having written them.
yeah.
So that's kind of a go-to, check-in point with me.
Mhm. And I have this quote saved. It's not a part of like my list, but I just kind of have a list of different list of quotes that I kind of keep. But it says that people who are experts at any skill become experts because they learn how to become rewarded from the work itself. They don't actually have something that you don't. They just measure success differently. And so
Hmm.
to basically kind of add to what you're saying there, like, yeah, you maybe the numbers aren't where you want them to be, but you can look at what you've done and say, I wrote Substack articles consistently for well over a year. Look at all the progress you made. I'm sure you've become a much better and thoughtful writer over that time. And maybe Substack isn't what ends up working out for you, but maybe it's something else. And all that skill and
Yeah.
experience that you got from it ends up, being worth it.
That's also probably a super beneficial practice to develop because my understanding is that the goalpost, um, and I'm actually directly quoting, I think Eric Weinstein in his appearance on one of his appearances on Lex's podcast, they were talking about, the idea that like, oh, I want to make this much money or I want to do whatever it is. Well, it's like as soon as you make that much money, you're just going to want more money. So
Yeah.
if your faith and your whatever fulfillment comes from achieving goals, you're never going to be fulfilled. And so it's just another reason. It's like, no, the reward comes from the process. Yeah.
Yeah. Like bit of a tangent here, but like when I was in college for the 2 years that I went, that was when my like e-commerce businesses really started to take off. And I had set specific like numerical goals of like, I want to hit this much in revenue on a monthly basis or whatever. And um, I had like different goals set out for different time frames. And like kind of once you check off all of those boxes, it becomes very unfulfilling because like, okay, you set out what you accomplished to do, but in the end, like what you were trying to accomplish was just like a certain number. It wasn't actually like building a business that you're passionate about and like learning to fall in love with the process of building itself. Uh, And so that was like a very hard lesson for me because I had seemingly done well, but I was also like I've done well, but like why do I not feel like satisfied or fulfilled with all these goals that I thought would make me like, super
Yeah.
proud and happy. So
Uh, no, I had the same exact experience with the Air Force and with running in the past. I enlisted out of high school with the idea that I was never gonna do it for my whole life. Like I was just gonna do my 4 years and get out. And my thought was like, man, once I get this done, like this just cake, like it's like something's
right.
gonna be different. But you
Yeah.
hit that date and everything's the fucking same. and
Yeah.
and that's crushing. Like that realization was crushing. Um,
Yeah.
so that's a huge lesson to learn.
Yeah. It's never enough. So you really have to learn to be happy with just what you're doing regardless of the outcome and not be happy on based on the outcome itself.
Yeah.
I also
Do
learned
you,
that the hard way. So
do you think like setting numerical goals? I mean, I think it still seems to have value in the sense that it gives you some sort of direction. But I mean, is it possible to set those goals without putting too much weight on them?
yeah, I think once you have that acknowledgement of like, okay, I know these numerical goals aren't like what I'm trying to accomplish in order to be happy or fulfilled, then they're definitely still very useful, especially in business. I mean, it's all numbers, right? Um, and it's good to like break things up into very like more short term goals. Um, and I think you should only set goals if they're like quantifiable. So they kind of have to be numbers. But at the end of the day, you should have the mindset of like, okay, if I hit this amount of revenue for the year, that I'm going to be happy. Like you should ideally be very happy along the entire process because you love what you're doing and, you enjoy the process of building the business. Um,
Yeah. It's like the goal isn't the number. The goal is to become competent, but the number is just like the mechanism in which you can become, or aiming at the number is like
yeah.
the mechanism that allows you to become competent.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. It's more of like a measure. Like if you want to get really, if you love business and you want to get really good at business, the best way to track that is how much money you're making. So,
Mm.
uh, it should, like you said, you shouldn't derive like your happiness from that end goal of the number itself. Um, so moving on to the first one that I wrote down, this was just kind of something that popped into my head on a very long drive. So I put the most important decisions that you make in life should also be the most effortless. Um, and I was thinking about this a lot because it's kind of like paradoxical, I guess. Like you would think the biggest decisions in your life should actually be, um, they should require a lot of thought and a lot of careful planning because of like their life altering decisions, whether it's like a career path, a marriage, whatever it is. Like these are literally life altering decisions. Like there's only 3 or 4 of these big decisions that you make throughout your life that are super, super important. But I think I just found it really interesting that like these actually shouldn't be things that you think about much at all. They should just be things that kind of come to you naturally because like let's take a career for an example. Basically all of I wouldn't count middle school because it's not as career focused, but like high school and college, all of this is like exploratory in a way to try and like figure out what your interests are, figure out what career path might be good for you. And that's like at least 8 years of school that you're kind of in this phase of like trying to figure out what it is that you enjoy doing. And so a lot of people put way
I
too much thought.
real quick, I think that was,
Yeah,
I think that did school way too much justice. It's not that exploratory. You can go
yeah.
read a textbook
In
for
theory, in theory, it should be.
Yeah,
But yeah,
right.
you're totally right there. But yeah, like
Real quick, I wanna
realistically,
let me back
go
up.
ahead,
Okay.
go for it.
Like, let's prepare these kids for the real world by totally secluding them from the real world. Uh,
Basically,
it makes so it's genius. It's a fantastic idea. Okay,
if
I'm done.
anything, is probably counterproductive. But okay, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So like a career path, for example, like I've been victim of this before. Like, or I guess I was a bit lucky in the sense that I knew what I wanted to do from a very early age. But for a lot of people, this is like a tough decision because they don't know what they want to do. They get kind of stuck in analysis paralysis of like, I have all these options. I'm like sort of interested in this, sort of interested in that, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, these decisions should actually be like extremely simple because I think innately we all have things that we are just naturally interested in, like things that growing up you just did because you just loved it, like things you could spend hours doing. And that's if you if you kind of look back on your life and think like, okay, what do I just do naturally because I've just always loved it and had like this innate interest in doing it? That's what you should be doing within your career path, or at least related to it in some way. And for me, that was like business. Like as soon as I got a laptop at like 12, I think, and within 2, 3 years of it, like I just naturally found myself into like doing things online to make money because I thought it was like super fun. And so at like 14, 15, that's when I started doing that. And I didn't even think about it. I just happened. Like that's ideally how you should stumble your way into a career path or a relationship. Like it shouldn't be things that you try and like force and like really break down into some super analytical thing. It should just be like, well, what just works for you, you know? And I
There
think it's
there's
very
a
easy to
key
get lost in the thought process there.
there's a key to that though. Uh, um, a prerequisite of that happening, of one being in that position where they just know, uh, would probably be a lot of engagement with the world.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure kids are getting that now, like we just talked about. They're
Yeah.
locked up in a school for 40 hours a week, and then they go and probably watch a lot of TV and or play video games. I mean, obviously that's not all kids, but a lot of them, and they
Yeah.
probably a lot of them do that a lot. So
Mhm.
that just prevents them from that real interaction and really limits the things they're exposed to till then they get to a point where it does come time to decide what they want to do. And they like obviously have no clue.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I agree with that. I think we were kind of lucky that I mean, I definitely grew up playing video games. Like I played all the time, but we were also kind of lucky that we weren't as influenced by social media and stuff at our when we were younger. Whereas now it's like kids are growing up on like they go to school, do their thing, come back, and like they're either playing video games, they scroll TikTok for hours, watch YouTube
Mm.
for hours. And so yeah, you're definitely right. There's a matter of like getting the proper exposure to the world in order to find what it is that you are interested in. But this doesn't, it's not even for people growing up. This could be for people that are like 40 and still like, not happy with whatever their career is and still think like, okay, I just feel like I should be doing something more meaningful or something I'm more passionate about. Like, I think
It
go ahead.
um no, I it's never too late to go on an adventure.
Yeah.
Uh, I
I
think
think,
Rich Roll is an example of that. Um,
mhm,
I think he was 39. He was like an alcoholic lawyer when he just decided like fuck this. Um, this isn't me. And he got back into ultra endurance sport and started his podcast. And, here he is like, whatever. He might even be 60 by now. But, so, just super
yeah,
successful. But he did that at 40. That's insane.
yeah,
Nobody just
yeah,
switches like that at 40. But that's just, it's never too
yeah.
late.
Sometimes that's just what you need to do in order to figure out what your true calling is, I guess. But I find it really interesting, I guess, that like these decisions, while they seem like, or they are extremely, extremely important, it's just very important to like not overthink them, and really just go with whatever feels natural to you and what just works the best for you. Because I overthink most things, and so I've been stuck in this process before of like, oh, what business do I want to start? And I need this like certain set of criteria for businesses that I want to do, and like all of it is just so unnecessary because at the end of the day, I just love business. And so it really doesn't matter all that much, what I end up doing as long as I just enjoy the entire process itself. Um, and
Yeah.
I
Do you mean, but I want to clarify, you probably don't mean like you're happy throughout the whole process. You I
oh
think maybe
no,
what you mean, by joy is like it's fulfilling. Fulfillment is not a does not always come to us through happiness.
no. If anything, I'd argue the opposite. Like I think you need to go through those tough times in order to feel fulfilled. Because there's no enjoyment of doing easy things. Like or there, I guess there's maybe a little bit, but like you get way more enjoyment and fulfillment of like going through really tough things that force you to like grow and adapt as a person. So yeah, you should never like just because you aren't happy all the time doing something, that does not mean you're in the wrong career path, um, or anything. Like there's always going to be those honestly sometimes like very dark times where you're just like, maybe this isn't meant for me. Like maybe I'm completely off base here and I'm just like out of my realm and I need to do something completely different. Like that those times will hit. But um kind of goes back to what we were saying earlier. Like you just have to remain focused and not get swayed by these really dark times.
Yeah. One one interesting area where this is apparent or that this relates to is relationships. I think we've talked about it before on the podcast, but um, forgot who, I think it was Jordan Peterson. He, just talks about how in the West, we have a deep misconception of what a relationship should be. We think it should just be this like ever ending source of happiness. And then obviously when you get in a relationship with that belief and then probably quickly find out that it's not an ever ending source of happiness. Well, then you're like, oh, this relationship is bad. And then it fails. Um, well, no, just because you're not happy doesn't mean it's not a beneficial, good
Yeah.
relationship. It probably just means there's some part of you that this other person is trying to destroy because it's bad, and you obviously don't. That nobody likes getting critiqued or changed, but whenever it's ultimately it's a good thing, and it's just something that should be a part uh, of a relationship, and something you should fight to get through. And mm,
Yeah, for sure. Um, would you like, let's move on to your next one.
okay, this is one I'm excited about. This one, so um, the importance of consuming the transcendental. Uh, to explain what the transcendental is, I would just say, like, if you look out on the Rocky Mountain, like whatever, onto a mountain range, like you're somewhere in the Rockies and you're just facing this like beautiful vista. I think we can all recognize that as like that's transcendental. Or when you listen to really good music, um, that's transcendental. When you're just like blown away and taken by it, like your body is almost like enveloped in it. That's transcendental. Um, Comedy, I think, like we both watched the last episode of Kill Tony, with Dr. Phil. I think that was transcendental. And um, okay, so for something to be transcendental, I think it requires a lot of. There are just people out there that are way better that can explain this way better. But it seems like for something to be transcendental, there has to be a couple of different factors that are like playing with each other and counteracting each other. And it's just this beautiful thing of many things messing with one another to create like one big mind blowing thing, if that makes sense. But anyway, I think it's important to consume these things because it's almost like church. Like it reminds you of the best the world has to offer. And I've noticed like here recently, like I haven't really, with school, I've just been super busy and I haven't got to deal with these things as much. And I feel like I've noticed that just in my mood, in my attitude, whatever. I've noticed this kind of dip. And so I don't know. I just want to get your thoughts on like if idea even makes sense, if you kind of, or if you have noticed that as well.
Before I go any further, can you, or at least what it means to you, can you like define transcendental, or like what do you mean exactly when you say that?
Um, hmm, like Led Zeppelin, uh, I would describe as transcendental. It's almost so good that it's not believable. Uh, so an
Okay,
example I heard is like if you're looking at the Grand Canyon, like it almost doesn't even look real, uh, but it is real, and so it's like kind of like you in your state, but it's better. And so by
I see.
looking at it, by consuming it, it like draws you up. Um, and I almost think that's like critical. That drawing that motion, that effect is
Yeah,
like of unbelievable importance because without it, like let's say you don't interact with this stuff and you don't go to church, um, and then there's nothing pulling you up in life. It's like you're doomed. You're doomed to say,
do you think that in order to experience this feeling, because I know exactly what you're talking about, but do you think in order to experience this, there needs like the person? needs to be open to it or at least aware of it, because I think if you put a large group of people all to Grand Canyon, you're gonna get very mixed emotions across all of them. Like, some people are going to experience this. Um, some people may cry, others may just be like, "Cool, rocks." Like,
Yeah.
do you think you kinda
Yeah.
have to
So
be at least open-minded to this in some way and to fully experience and get that lift?
yeah. So I'm gonna mention a biblical story, but I don't think you necessarily have to be like religious about this. I'm just using this story because it explains what
Mhm.
is necessary in order to experience this. But so in the story of Exodus, um, Moses encounters God, but it's only because like he he like turns and acknowledges God, and it's like in that acknowledgement of God that displays like a willingness to see the transcendental. Um, so yeah, yeah, you for sure have to be like open minded.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's super important. Like, I personally experienced this the most, I think, from primarily music, and I never really thought of it this way before, but comedy is actually a great example. But yeah, I think the biggest thing for sure would just be having an open mind to it, because something I've tried practicing a lot more over the past couple of years is just like having like a really strong appreciation for life and like everything it has to offer. And I think a lot of people get way too caught up in, or it's very easy to get caught up in just like the day to day life, and not really like fully be able to appreciate, the experiences and things that you get to go through. And so, yeah, I totally agree that it's essential to live for in order to have like, I guess like a well-rounded and fulfilled life.
Yeah, yeah. Let me run this by you. So in that same Lex episode with Eric Weinstein, um, he stated Eric did that the point of luxury and food and um maybe he mentioned sex. I think that certainly fits in here, but like the point of these things isn't consumption, which I think is what we think of them today. Is how that's how we think of them today. They're things to be consumed, but but he states like that's not the point. The point is they're reminders of like that transcendental thing that is better than what you could be, whatever.
Mhm.
It's that those have the same effect as comedy or whatever. Which I think food. I mean, uh, hopefully we experience this tomorrow with the restaurant you're taking us to. But yeah, food is certainly a good example of that.
And I think for me too, it's more of just like I think for me, the transcendental part of like more minor activities of food or stuff like that's not the thing itself that you're doing, but just the experience of getting like to share that with other people. Like, I think if you really take the time to like kind of step back for a minute and just like think about it and like live in the moment for a moment, that's for me, like, I guess what I would describe as the transcendental part.
Mm. Yeah, no, that's well, good conversation is
Yeah.
another part of it, which comes with that. Um, yeah, you get a conversation where you're both riffing apart but together, and it moves. I don't know, moves you from here to there. That's like as good as it gets, and um, you notice that. You notice when you have a conversation like that. You feel
Yeah.
ever juiced up by it.
Yeah. I think it requires a bit of, I guess, practice in a way to be able to acknowledge these moments and really like fully appreciate them. But it's definitely something to like, I would say, keep on your mind and be able to like be able to recognize these events when they do happen and like really, appreciate them. Because they could be in the smallest of things, like you said, like just a conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I had one the other day. It was like a 5-minute interaction with one of my professors, but we just um, had a great discussion about uh, religion. Very brief, very whatever, but it was just like one of those things. Yeah, exactly. One of those small things in a day that's just like, hell
Yeah,
yeah.
you kind of walk away from it, and it just kind of makes the rest of your day or your week.
hmm
So we're definitely not going to get through all of them, but this is good. Lots of good conversations stemming from these. The next one that I had put down was the cynics get to be right and the optimists get to be rich. I love this quote because, especially if you're active on Twitter or X, that it is filled with cynics. And it's something that I just have never been able to understand. I guess I understand why they do it, but I don't I definitely don't agree with it in any form. Like, people get this sort of like moral high ground or something, or it allows them to like feel more intelligent than maybe they actually are by being cynical about something. Like, to give an example, like let's say SpaceX is going to have a launch, um, or in the early stages they were going to like when the company was still very new, is very undetermined in whether or not how successful they would actually be. It was so easy to say like, oh, that rocket's going to blow up, or like, oh, this company's going to go bankrupt. Um, And you're most likely right whenever you say that. But what are you gaining from being cynical about things? And people take this approach like way too far. Like, any kind of major event happens, the immediate knee jerk reaction that you're going to see from most people is the cynical one. Whereas the optimists, they are the ones that are on the other side. So the people actually operating SpaceX and like working for them, they're the ones that gain all the benefit in the end. Like, maybe you were right about SpaceX launches for the first several years. Like, cool, congrats. But at the end of the day, the people that have the most to gain are the ones that are the most optimistic. And so there's mo- to summarize that, basically, there is just no value in being cynical about anything. Like, why not take the optimistic
Yeah.
approach um, and just about everything that you encounter? And another quote too that I is related to this that I really like is I would rather be optimistic and wrong than be pessimistic and right. Like,
Because at least being optimistic gives you a chance of something better.
exactly. Uh, I It's something that I try to keep in the back of my head because I would much rather just be super optimistic about things, or like AI is a big one. Everyone thinks, or a majority of people think that AI is going to end very, very poorly. And they may be right, but what do you have to gain from being pessimistic about that for the next decade, you know? Why not be optimistic and think this is going to lift everybody up? Think of all the good things that can come from it, you know?
It's like you know the that bullshit about like manifesting your destiny.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's in part true, I think, but not because like, oh, this is what I want. I'm gonna think about it a lot, and then it's just gonna magically come true.
Yep.
It's not. That's not how it works. I think you like can't enact something different than what you believe. So does that make sense? Like if you do, you're
100%.
gonna go insane. Try it. Try like you're really motivated and you want to work hard. Try like not working hard for 2 weeks. You're gonna explode. Um,
Yeah.
so if if your inner belief is that just like everything's stupid and everything's doomed, you're most likely going to act in a way that reflects those beliefs. And then, like, yeah, of course, that's going to result in everything being stupid and doomed.
Yeah. Yeah. On the flip side, I actually had a tweet about this a while ago, but it's why karma exists. It's not because of some like magical force that causes bad things to happen to bad people, but bad people tend to make bad actions, and eventually that's going to result in bad outcomes. And the opposite is true. So like I believe in manifestation, but I don't believe it as like, oh, let me just like think about things really, really hard and like they're gonna come true. Like yeah, you should do that, but you should do it because you truly believe in it, not because like, oh, I'm just gonna like think it into existence.
Yeah.
Um, like
So,
it's more
it,
like you said, you have to wholeheartedly believe in what it is that you're doing to in order to achieve that outcome.
yeah, that's an interesting thing you just said. Wholeheartedly believe. Um, I'm of a more naturally pessimistic um, nature, and it's hard for me to wholeheartedly believe. Like, I almost feel like I'm the opposite of the normal person. The normal person is probably in their heart optimistic, and then it's their intellect that's like, no, this is dumb. Like, it's not going to work out. Like, look at all these reasons that you're going to fail or that, well, the world's doomed. But like, I feel more like that here. And then it's my head who just from like read everything I've read and whatever, like, who's learned the exact thing we've just talked about here. That's like, no, dude, like you gotta believe or whatever. Um,
Yeah.
and so like, I think I think that's something to really be concerned about for my own sake. Like, I've, and I haven't really figured it out and I gotta get the good thoughts from my head to my heart. I think there's like, in the Bible, you see it. It's like, it's not what you do, it's who you are on the inside. And I mean, I think that relates to this. It's like, um, I think it just really shows that this, wow, it's kind of funny. Like, I think this is just an important thing for me to figure out. Like, how do I actually take these good beliefs and like feel them physically?
Yeah. You have to kind of trick yourself into delusion in a way. Like, because I've definitely been there where, and I think all people that that really like to think about things analytically or just like really break things down, they get caught in this trap because I've been there so many times. Um, it's very easy to like think your way out of something. Like, if you want to start a business, there you could just think of a million different things that could go wrong, and it becomes very easy to like demotivate yourself, um, or almost talk your way out of it. And you remember a while ago, and I told you about the IQ bell curve meme, how I think that just explains everything in life. Like
Yeah.
most people have seen it, but to explain it, it's a bell curve where on the bottom is your IQ score, and then on the y-axis is like the distribution of people, like the percentage of people. And so at the lower end of IQ, it's very low, like there's not that many people. In the middle IQ range, it's like very high because that's where a majority of people fall into. And then the high IQ range goes back to very low. And the meme, the joke is that the very low IQ people and the very high IQ people are like they think the same things, whereas all the people in the middle, they get stuck in this trap that we're talking about of like overthinking things and like becoming pessimistic. And so in the case of a business, the low IQ and the high IQ people, they're both probably thinking like, I'm going to start a business and it's going to be successful. And then everybody in between is like, no, it's not that easy. Like, here's all the different things that could go wrong. Like, you're not gonna make it along the way, blah, blah, blah. And so you kind of have to find how, like I said before, you have to figure out how to almost trick yourself into that delusion of just thinking like, it's just going to work. Like,
Yeah.
you know, And you like I said before, like, you have to wholeheartedly believe that, and then anything outside of that realm of possibility, like, you should just not even think about. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. Well, and part of that too is if you pick a thing that's properly meaningful, um, you don't even really have to trick yourself to like ignore the risks. It's not really a matter of like ignoring them. It's more just, I'm going to do this despite those risks because it's the only thing to do. That's a very Peterson kind of thought there. Um, but it's one that's like, well, it's just the YOLO thing. You only live once. It's very true, just so why not just, it's probably going to suck anyway. If you just sit around,
Yeah.
we're seeing that in all this comfort in the modern world. We're all still super unhappy. So, that route's not going to get you anything. So you might as well do the hard thing. Because, okay, so it might succeed. And if it does, that's great for you and everybody around you. If it's a proper thing that you've picked. And, if it fails, well, then you're going to be just as miserable than, like you were anyway. So no harm, no foul.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's hard to get to that point where you kind of have that optimistic delusion in a way. I'm trying to think of some more concrete ways of explaining how I kind of got there because I definitely have been through phases where I was not that case at all. But I don't know. I think for me, and this is just how I do it, it should be different for everybody, obviously. But when it comes to business, I have just always felt like super confidently that this is just what I'm meant to do and I'm going to be successful at it. And I don't really know how to describe how I even got to that point. It's just something I've always had inside of me and I've felt. And so I always have that to lean on to, regardless of like how bad things are going or like what phase of life that I'm in. Um, and you can kind of trick yourself into thinking like, oh, this is just my destiny or what I'm meant to do. Like however you want to justify it to make it like make sense in your head to where you can like wholeheartedly believe that, you have to figure out what that story is or what that message is that allows you to get to that point. And like I said, it's different for everybody. Um, but you have to kind of find that level. And I've definitely been through phases where it gets way easier to become pessimistic, um, and talk yourself out of things. And I've done it so many times, but you just kind of have to learn how to think less. Um, and it's
Yeah.
something that I think takes a lot of practice to do.
Um, but, I think an important thing to learn too is like through COVID and the 2020 elections, those were easy times to be pessimistic. But one thing I've learned, I'm not good at living by it. Uh, Hopefully I get there one day. Uh, it's just tough. But one thing I've learned that is true, um, is just because the world is burning doesn't mean you have to burn with it. Um, and I mean, obviously there are circumstances that are beyond your control. And like, if things are, I mean, yeah, sometimes there's situations where that's physically true, but like the failures of the world, don't have to, crush your spirit. Um, you see how that connects?
Yeah, that seems to be a very Gen Z thing, millennial thing. I don't really know what the separation is for the age groups there, but a lot of people growing up now, like you see this a lot on social media and stuff. A lot of people are just like, "Oh, the world is just completely going to shit now." And they're like, "Oh, what's the point of like doing all of this? Like, what's the point of like I don't want to bring kids into this world because everything's
That's
just
my
so messed up." And
Dude, that's
It's
the
like,
craziest one.
yeah, it's like, what do you have to gain to have that kind of mindset? Like, it, it serves no purpose whatsoever. Like,
And it
sure,
dudes.
yeah,
The I uh so I, at my former school, I went to Carroll College for whatever, a semester, and there my roommate, he's a genius. He's just wicked smart. But he told me that he's like, yeah, I don't think I want kids. Like this world's so screwed up. And um, okay, think about that. I think at one point in our history, maybe there was a time where the human population got like super small. Uh,
mhm,
we just got like decimated for some reason. And like, okay, so you don't think that those people were like, holy shit, this is crazy. Like there's little to no hope. What if they had that same mindset? There would be no us. You know,
yeah,
if you don't accept the 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 risk, well then you've already lost. It's over. There's no
yeah.
there's no better to come.
I don't think anyone actually believes that. I think it's more virtue signaling than anything. It's
Mm,
like, oh, I'm smart. I can recognize that here's all these bad things that are going to happen or that are happening in life. And so to prevent that, I'm not going to like bring people into the world because it's the right thing to do, the good thing to do. And I don't think anyone actually thinks like, and there's maybe some people, but I think it's more of a virtue signaling thing than actually thinking like, wow, things are actually super awful. Because I don't even know how you can objectively think that. Like you said, like there's like with the Black Plague or something, like a third of the world's population wiped out. Like, how can you think that the times that we live in right now are just like horrifically bad to the point where you're like, I don't even want to raise a child? Uh, I, I, I just think it's more of a virtue signaling thing.
yeah. Uh, I mean that makes sense because it's definitely not logical. Because as soon as you say I don't want to, things are so. As soon as you say I'm not going to have kids because the world is so bad, it's like, and it's the right thing to do. I'm going to save these kids from their misery. It's like, no, that is the exact opposite, of making things better and doing the
Yeah.
right thing because it guarantees that there is no better.
Yeah. I've never understood that. Um, I think we've probably got time for one more if you want to do yours, and then we can kind of wrap up on this last one.
Okay. Um, I'll do number 5. So it's exposing oneself to the extremes, its importance and effects. So I guess I mean this uh, both in a physical manner and in a intellectual manner. Uh, Probably start with an intellectual manner. So uh, I follow this guy on Twitter. I used to be a big fan of him. Uh, I'm not really anymore because he's gone off the rails essentially. Um,
Is
but
it?
I still it's Owen Benjamin.
I've
Uh,
heard the name, but I don't.
so
I'm not
he used to be
familiar.
a comic. He used to be a comic, and he was brilliant. But then, uh, kind of like as wokeness came up and cancel culture and kind of this new modern phase we're in, he like was very whatever. Um, uh, he just spoke out against it in a, I would say, in a irresponsible manner, and I mean that in the sense that like his points then, I don't think they weren't wrong, but he did it in a manner that like ensured his self destruction, if that makes sense. And as his that self-destruction occurred, he became like more off the rails. And so I partly follow him still out of a sense of like nostalgic, like, man, like because I love his comedy. It's so good. So I partly just follow him for that reason, but then also I kind of use it as like a checkpoint, like something to bounce my beliefs off of, just to see if there's something that's lacking or if I'm wrong not that yeah, I kind of just use it as a way to like pull me out of my beliefs to look back at them. Because just the nature of his points are so opposite at times of mine that it really is just like, and, um, yeah, so they're just so opposite of mine and they just make you think like, okay, if I'm wrong and he's right, like I'm way off base. So like, let's check
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah. So just like getting out of your echo chamber, basically, and uh, trying to stay familiar with opposing ideas so you can kind of check yourself and make sure that, you're, I guess, still trying to phrase what you were saying in a different way. But basically, like, if,
So like he just has a particular way of criticizing, not mainstream belief, but like, okay, so like we both know I'm a big fan of Jordan Peterson.
yeah,
Um, when Jordan says something, I'll think about it. I don't just like blindly accept what he says. Like it always tends to be just really good stuff. So I just always end up kind of buying into it. But I do think about it in
yeah,
some manner. Like if he were to say something that I didn't find agreeable, like I wouldn't just be like, oh yeah, okay, just because he's Jordan Peterson. Um, but Owen will like harshly criticize Peterson in a manner that I think is like destructive and not beneficial initially. But then I think about it and it almost is beneficial in the sense that it's just like, s- I don't know. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Why is that? I guess that's my question. Like, why is that sort of criticism beneficial? Because it does seem to be. Um, it seems to be important to let the crazy guy speak. Um, but I don't know why.
yeah, I don't know. Probably because you'll find that, I mean, if you have one guy stating one idea, and then you have another guy on the complete opposite end of the spectrum where your own personal beliefs end up are probably going to be somewhere in the middle because you can kind of you get both perspectives in a way. But
I don't
I'm not
think.
familiar with this guy, but go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think that's the case. Like, because I mean, like Owen's stuff is probably borderline like racist or. I mean, it's pretty. Sometimes he just
Just like
makes some pretty.
irrational.
Yeah, but I think okay, now I think I figured it out. So I think what it does is it prevents me from like seeing Peterson as some sort of uncriticizable, holy figure. If that does that make sense? I
Yeah.
think that's why it's important. Because without Owen, that voice, like it would be probably pretty easy for me, or a lot easier for somebody to look at Jordan and just be like, "Oh, everything he says is fantastic." But it's
Mhm.
refreshing to have a guy that's been like, "This dude's full of shit," because you're like, "Wait a minute, is
Yeah.
he?" And you're like, okay, he's not. Like he has yet to be full of shit, but
Yeah. I think it might even just be more of the fact that you try to think independently, whereas I think most people do not. Um, like if you kind of take someone like Elon Musk as an example, I follow him very closely, but I'm not one of those people that just like blindly adopts anything that he says or believes. Uh, And if you see Elon fans on Twitter, they are basically just like echo chambers for anything that he says or does. And it's just blind support, which I don't think you should do that with anyone, regardless of like how much you actually do agree with them or how successful they are or whatever it is. Like you should challenge everything that you read to some extent in order to like really make sure that you personally do believe that, it's
Yeah.
not.
And not only for your sake, but for their sake as well. I mean,
Yeah.
uh, criticism is the best way to make something better. So
Yeah. I think a lot of people don't. I would say a majority of people don't do that. They they kind of just grab ideas from where either grab ideas from people that kind of confirms any existing notions they already have, or they just grab ideas from people that they perceive as like very smart and
yeah,
reliable, and so they just kind of go with it blindly. And that's like a pretty dangerous trap to get into.
yeah. Even if the person they're following blindly is good, it's yeah, that's a dangerous situation. So, dude, that's I feel very pleased that we just figured it out. It just bothered me. I can't.
Well, hey, you just gotta talk through it sometimes.
You're right.
Uh, I mean, we've got a couple more, but we're kind of at the hour point there. Do you wanna Is there any more that you kinda wanna do, or maybe just save them for the next episode?
Uh, no, unless you want to pick one, I'm good to call it.
No, I don't think so. I think this is a lot of fun, and we kind of got some really interesting ideas. This is like more of an experiment for us. Like we wanted to just try something completely different on the pod and like see how it would go. And I really enjoyed it. So I think this might be
Yeah.
something that we try to do a bit regularly. So yeah, I think we'll come back another time with a new list of ideas and just kind of do similar format. And yeah, I thought it was super productive. So
Yeah. Likewise.
um, yeah, thanks everybody for watching, and we'll be back again next week.